Picture the gleaming lights of an opulent beach resort against a crimson sunset, where a dashing millionaire strolls hand in hand with a mysterious beauty, while his pregnant wife paces the halls of a corporate boardroom, methodically planning her next move. Secrets seethe beneath every champagne toast, and betrayal echoes through every whispered promise of love. What begins as a fairy tale romance soon spirals into a labyrinth of deceit. A single decision, the choice to pursue forbidden passion, unlocks a chain of events that threatens to topple an empire. Welcome to a saga of power, ambition, revenge, and shocking retribution, where even the wealthiest are not immune to the swift hand of karma. Nicholas Adley. Known to close friends simply as Nick, appeared to have it all. At 38, he was the CEO of Adley Innovations, a tech solutions company he had built from the ground up. With a net worth rumored to exceed $100 million, Nick's impeccable suits, stylish black Mercedes Maybach, and membership in exclusive golf clubs were only the most superficial trappings of his success. Beyond that veneer lay a fierce determination that had catapulted him from modest beginnings in a cramped one-bedroom apartment to the manicured lawns of the country's most prestigious gated communities. Nick's wife, Vivian Adley, was every bit his match in ambition and grace. Raised in a well-connected family in Washington, D.C., she had grown accustomed to polished events and the subtle power plays of high society. The two met at a charity gala in Manhattan, forging an instant connection over a shared love for strategic board games and classical music. Their courtship was a whirlwind that culminated in a lavish wedding at the Claridge Ballroom, where top executives, celebrities, and politicians gathered to celebrate what seemed like the definitive modern power couple. For years, Vivian had been the pillar behind Nick's unrelenting push to expand Adley Innovations. She worked tirelessly in the background, studying corporate law and even assisting the company with negotiations for its most significant deals. When Vivian discovered she was pregnant with their first child, the corporate world could not contain its excitement. Investors and employees saw her pregnancy as a sign of new beginnings, a symbol that even the unstoppable Nick Adley was settling into the notion of continuity and legacy. Yet behind her luminous smile, Vivian was troubled. Over the last 6 months, she had noticed subtle shifts in Nick's demeanor. He was often busy with late-night meetings, and his phone seemed surgically attached to him at all times. Once affectionate and eager to share his thoughts, Nick had grown distant. His once spontaneous weekend getaways with Vivian had dwindled to sporadic dinners in the city, more perfunctory than romantic. Even her mother, the ever-observant Elizabeth Townsend, had remarked that Nick looked distracted during family gatherings. "Are you taking care of yourself?" dear Elizabeth would ask Vivian, sipping her chamomile tea. Vivian would muster a polite smile and assure her mother everything was fine. She yearned to believe it herself. Nick, meanwhile, was grappling with a fierce conflict of conscience he never thought he'd face. The object of his torment was Lauren Reyes, a newcomer to Adley Innovations. Lauren, a stunning, sharp-witted woman in her late 20s, had been hired as a software architect, specializing in AI-driven analytics. She was introduced to Nick by his CFO, Marjorie Bennett, at an industry conference a year ago. From the moment they exchanged business cards, a quiet gravitational pull bound them. Nick tried to ignore it first out of loyalty to his wife, then out of an instinct for self-preservation. But each fleeting interaction with Lauren only intensified the undercurrent of attraction that threatened to unravel the life he had so carefully constructed. Lauren was neither naive nor predatory. She admired Nick's intellect and charm, but she also recognized the boundaries that a married man with an expecting wife should honor. For a time, she kept her distance. Yet in the confines of late-night strategy sessions and rushed dinners between coding sprints, small compliments turned into playful banter, and fleeting touches evolved into electrifying chemistry. By the time Nick found himself leaning in for that first forbidden kiss, he was far beyond the point of no return. The perfect life that Nick and Vivian had projected to the world was already cracking at the edges. Friends, family, and even the ever-watchful eyes of employees at Adley Innovations started to sense that something was amiss. But few would have guessed how explosive and far-reaching the fallout would be once truth and betrayal clashed in the high-stakes arena of corporate power. Months into his clandestine affair with Lauren Reyes, Nick discovered that juggling secrets at home and at work was far more challenging than any business deal he had ever orchestrated. The tension tightened like a vice around his throat each day. He grew paranoid about phone logs, cryptic text messages, and any inadvertent slip of the tongue that might reveal his double life. Despite his caution, guilt gnawed at him, especially when he saw Vivian's gentle hand resting protectively on her growing belly. Unknown to Nick, Vivian had begun to suspect something deeper was wrong. A late-night rummage through credit card statements revealed suspicious charges, a luxury flower bouquet from a top-tier florist nowhere near their home. Multiple dinners for two at upscale restaurants in parts of the city that Vivian had never visited, and most puzzlingly, a boutique hotel reservation made in Lauren's name. The final puzzle piece came from a concerned friend, Teresa Briggs, who worked in finance at Adley Innovations. Teresa mentioned in the gentlest way possible that she had overheard talk of Nick and Lauren traveling together for client meetings, suspiciously scheduled during weekends. Vivian felt her heart sink. Confronting Nick prematurely might drive him further into secrecy. Instead, she decided to consult with her family friend and legal advisor, Daniel Townsend. Together they formed a plan. Daniel suggested patience and precision, a thorough documentation of every suspicious transaction and phone record. If Vivian ever needed leverage, whether personal or corporate, she would have it at her fingertips. As Vivian's worry grew, Nick and Lauren slipped further into their questionable euphoria. Their dalliance felt exhilarating, cloaked in the thrill of stolen moments and hushed phone calls. Lauren, initially uneasy, allowed herself to get swept up. She rationalized that Nick was in a loveless marriage, or that he was only staying with Vivian because of the baby on the way, excuses to ease her conscience. In time, Nick's desire for Lauren expanded beyond the stolen hours in the office or secret dinner reservations. He booked a weekend getaway in the Caribbean under the guise of a business trip to meet potential investors. He convinced Marjorie Bennett to cover for him, reassuring her that it was a private matter and that everything would be handled discreetly. As the CFO, Marjorie prided herself on loyalty, but even she felt a slight twinge of discomfort. This was a personal indulgence, far from the realm of corporate necessity. Nevertheless, she told herself it was not her place to interfere. Despite the moral quagmire, the vacation shimmered with indulgence. Nick and Lauren found themselves on a secluded beach in Barbados, sipping Mai Tais and gazing at turquoise waves. Under the radiant sun, they shared whispered confidences about their pasts and bright fantasies of a future, an impossible future. But in that blissful moment, they believed it could be real. Lauren confessed her fear of being labeled a home wrecker, and Nick reassured her that he had never been happier, words that would later come back to haunt both of them. While Nick was feeding Lauren strawberries dipped in melted chocolate, Vivian quietly solidified her strategy back home. Each day, she met with Daniel Townsend, reviewing the corporate structure of Adley Innovations. Though Nick owned the majority of the shares, Vivian noticed certain intricacies in the bylaws, small but significant clauses that Daniel believed could be leveraged in her favor. Additionally, Vivian had done more than her fair share of behind-the-scenes work at Adley Innovations. She was no naive housewife. She possessed a legal mind that had contributed to the company's success. Daniel advised her that if she moved precisely at the right time, her position in the corporate hierarchy would not be easily dismissed even by Nick. But Vivian did not rush. She was, after all, heavily pregnant, and the well-being of her unborn child was paramount. Stress and anger had to be contained, channeled into carefully measured actions instead of explosive confrontations. Nick returned from his idyllic jaunt with Lauren walking straight into the watchful gaze of Vivian. She greeted him at the door with soft eyes but an unreadable expression. Nick sensed an undercurrent of tension, though he found no immediate evidence of confrontation. He tried to appear cheerful to envelop her in a warm embrace, but her shoulders felt rigid beneath his hands. "How was your business trip?" she asked, her voice betraying none of her turmoil. "It was productive," Nick replied, forcing a smile. "Met some potential investors, but we'll see how it goes." She nodded, stepping aside to let him slip into the master bedroom, where he quickly stored away the suitcase that carried evidence of his deception, Lauren's perfume still lingering on the clothes inside. That night as they lay in bed, he pretended to sleep soundly while Vivian quietly placed a hand on her abdomen, wondering how much longer she could endure this facade without it tearing her apart. As Vivian's belly grew more prominent, her strength and resolve deepened. She confided in only a select few her mother, Elizabeth Townsend, her close friend, Teresa Briggs, and her lawyer, Daniel. Each served a distinct role. Elizabeth offered maternal support and reminded Vivian that dignity often meant biding one's time. Teresa, stationed within the corporate finance department, provided discreet updates on Nick's expenditures. Daniel guided her toward building a legally sound strategy that would protect both her and her unborn child's interests. Nick, unaware of Vivian's growing arsenal of information, believed he was skillfully navigating the precarious balance. He continued to meet Lauren in hush-hush rendezvous, booking penthouse suites or scheduling working lunches that extended into long afternoons. Any flicker of suspicion at the office was doused by Nick's reputation as a brilliant leader whose personal life had always seemed picture-perfect. A faint rumor here or there might crop up, but few dared to question the CEO to his face. Nevertheless, Nick sensed that Vivian was more guarded, her once lively eyes now veiled by caution. The subtle changes in her behavior, the locked drawers in her home office, her sudden interest in the organizational structure of Adley Innovations made him uneasy. When he asked her about it, she simply said, "I'm looking out for our future, Nick. I need to understand how everything works, especially with the baby coming." He accepted this explanation with a nod, though it left him with an underlying sense of worry. One day, a confrontation nearly erupted. Vivian, visibly exhausted from her pregnancy, asked Nick to drive her to a prenatal checkup. Nick hesitated. He had planned a lunch with Lauren at a new fusion restaurant downtown. As soon as Vivian saw the hesitation in his eyes, her suspicions roared to the surface. But rather than confronting him, she calmly said, "Never mind." Daniel offered to drive me. Nick blinked, confused and slightly relieved. He placed a quick kiss on her cheek and told her, "Take care. I'll see you later." The expression on Vivian's face as she turned away was as resolute as it was hurt. That evening, Vivian returned to the house, which felt more like a polished shell than a home. Nick was out again, an emergency client meeting, he had said. Alone, she prepared a simple dinner and painstakingly reviewed the documents Daniel had sent over. They detailed key clauses in Adley Innovations' corporate governance guidelines. One clause in particular caught her eye. In the event the CEO is deemed unfit to continue in his role, the board shall appoint the next most qualified senior executive or stakeholder with proven corporate and legal expertise to assume interim leadership. Vivian's involvement in the company's legal architecture meant she had a legitimate stake. If Nick were found unfit, she could claim interim leadership. The question was, how to prove Nick's unfitness without incurring legal or moral backlash. Meanwhile, Nick's world was slowly fracturing. Juggling a mistress and a pregnant wife demanded a level of emotional compartmentalization he wasn't prepared for. His neglected emails piled up and missed deadlines began to irritate the senior management team. Harrison Kim, the company's COO, and an old friend of Nick's privately chastised him for not reviewing key proposals on time. Marjorie Bennett, while still supportive, warned that discontent among shareholders could spike if Nick's performance didn't stabilize. Nick's emotional high with Lauren was tinged with anxieties about corporate unrest and spousal suspicion. In one particularly vulnerable moment, he confided in Lauren about his fears. "What if Vivian finds out about us?" he murmured, worry etched into his face. Lauren's eyes darted away, her fingers twisting a napkin. "We have to be cautious," she replied. "I never wanted to come between you and your wife, but we've come this far." The conversation was left incomplete, suspended in a cloud of unspoken dread. Nick offered to whisk Lauren away again this time to a lavish resort in the Maldives for a well-deserved break. She agreed, albeit anxiously. They made plans for the following month, ignoring the ticking time bomb that was Vivian's pregnancy, the corporate demands, and the swirl of rumors that refused to vanish. While Nick and Lauren plotted another escapade, Vivian and Daniel Townsend finalized a plan that could shift the entire balance of power within Adley Innovations. After double-checking relevant bylaws and aligning with certain sympathetic board members, Vivian had an ace up her sleeve, a formal petition to the board of directors, citing Nick's erratic behavior and potential financial improprieties as grounds for a temporary removal from his role as CEO. It was risky Vivian needed to ensure that the petition didn't appear as a spiteful move from a jealous wife. But if she could present it as an act to safeguard the company, especially when the CEO was compromised by personal issues, she might just pull it off. Thus the lines of battle were quietly drawn. The pregnant wife on one side, steeling her heart against the betrayal she felt, armed with legal strategies and a mother's determination to protect her child's future. On the other side, the millionaire husband, oblivious to the storm brewing at home, intoxicated by his mistress's allure, and convinced he was still in control. The inevitability of discovery finally struck when Nick's carefully woven facade began to unravel thread by thread. It started with a small oversight. One afternoon, in a rush to clear his texts, before Vivian glanced at his phone, Nick accidentally forwarded an email chain including flirty messages exchanged between him and Lauren to Vivian's secondary email address. In it, Lauren teased him about their upcoming Maldives trip, joking that they should stay an extra week and forget the rest of the world exists. Vivian's heart pounded as she read the message. The half-formed suspicions, the credit card statements, and the hushed warnings from friends, all crystallized into one stinging reality. Nick was planning yet another exotic vacation with Lauren, leaving Vivian behind, pregnant to handle the house, the company's future, and her own heartbreak. She called Daniel Townsend immediately. "Daniel." "It's happening," she murmured into the phone, her voice quivering. have the proof," Daniel, ever cool-headed, responded. "This might actually strengthen our case. It shows a pattern of negligence and impropriety. But Vivian, are you emotionally ready to go through with this once we start the legal process? There's no turning back." Vivian closed her eyes, tears threatening to spill over. "I have no choice. He left me with none." The confrontation came later that night. Instead of her usual stoic silence, Vivian decided to confront Nick directly. Armed with the incriminating email, she waited for him in the living room, lights dim, the tension palpable. When Nick returned home, he froze at the sight of her icy stare. "Vivian." He began removing his coat. "What's going on?" "Going on," she repeated in a tone he had never heard from her before. "I believe you can tell me. Perhaps you'd like to share your excitement for your upcoming trip to the Maldives with Lauren Reyes." Nick's face paled. His mind spun in search of plausible deniability, but the set of Vivian's jaw told him that the ruse was up. For a moment he thought of lying, claiming it was a business trip, but the expression on her face told him it would be futile. "Vivian, I'm sorry," he managed, voice trembling. "I never wanted to hurt you. It just happened. It didn't mean anything." Vivian let out a bitter laugh. "It didn't mean anything? Are you hearing yourself? Nick, you've been lying to me for months, spending fortunes on vacations and neglecting your duties at the company we built together. You've left me here pregnant with your child to chase after some fantasy." Nick tried to approach her, but she stepped back. The space between them felt like an abyss. "Let's talk about this calmly, please," he pleaded. "We can figure something out." "I still love you, Vivian." She shook her head. "Your words mean nothing to me anymore. I deserve better. Our child deserves better." The conversation that followed was more of a one-sided torrent of hurt and betrayal than a dialogue. Nick attempted half-hearted explanations, citing stress and confusion, but none of it alleviated the blow. By the time Vivian stormed into the bedroom, locking the door behind her, Nick stood in the hallway, stunned and defeated. But the night's revelations did not end there. Vivian, her tears spent, opened her laptop and forwarded the incriminating email chain to Daniel Townsend and a select group of board members she trusted. The message was concise. "My husband, the CEO, is currently compromised. He has neglected his responsibilities and misused company resources for personal affairs. For the sake of Adley Innovations, immediate action may be required." Across town, in the quiet glow of a lamp, Daniel opened Vivian's email, let out a heavy sigh, and began drafting the legal documents that would catalyze the next phase of this corporate and marital war. In that single evening, the secrets Nick had worked so hard to bury were laid bare, not just to Vivian, but to influential players within the company. His image as an astute, focused leader was about to take a devastating hit, and he had no inkling of how swiftly his carefully constructed empire would come crashing down. The board of directors at Adley Innovations was convened in an emergency session rarely seen in the company's history. Invitations went out at dawn with the curt explanation, "Urgent matters concerning CEO's conduct." Most members arrived with a mix of curiosity, annoyance, and concern. Harrison Kim, the COO, was the first to appear, bracing himself for what might be a catastrophic confrontation. Marjorie Bennett, the CFO, looked visibly anxious. Her usual composed demeanor rattled. Nick strode in, wearing a tailored navy suit and a forced air of confidence. His eyes darted around, searching for signs of who might be his ally and who had turned foe. Normally, He'd walk into a board meeting with swagger, calmly greeting everyone. This time he offered only curt nods, sweat gathering at his temples. The weight of the preceding night's confrontation with Vivian hung heavily in the room. Across the table sat Vivian, accompanied by Daniel Townsend. She wore a simple yet elegant outfit that highlighted her advanced pregnancy. The board members, many of whom had known her for years, watched in silent sympathy. Tension crackled in the air. The meeting commenced with the chair, a silver-haired gentleman named Sebastian Wu, clearing his throat. We're here today to address serious allegations concerning the professional conduct of our CEO, Nicholas Adley. We have been presented with evidence suggesting misuse of company funds, neglect of duties, and other improprieties that could potentially harm Adley Innovations' future. Nick opened his mouth to protest, but Sebastian held up a hand. We will hear from both sides, Mr. Adley. You may speak after Mrs. Adley presents her case. Vivian stood, leaning slightly on the table for support. She took a measured breath before speaking. I want to clarify that I am here today not as Nicholas Adley's wife, but as a substantial shareholder and legal contributor to Adley Innovations. Over the past several months, I have become increasingly concerned about Nick's behavior. He has neglected critical deadlines, diverted funds for personal use, including lavish vacations under the guise of client meetings, and compromised the stability of the company. She paused, allowing the gravity of her words to settle. I have also noted a pattern of erratic decision-making, which raises the question of whether he can continue to lead Adley Innovations effectively. This isn't a personal vendetta. It's about the company's best interests. We are on the cusp of major expansions, and I fear Nick's actions could jeopardize everything we've built. Nick's face burned red. You have no right, he began. She has every right, Daniel Townsend interrupted. Under the corporate bylaws, any significant shareholder who believes the CEO is acting to the detriment of the company may request a formal review by the board. We have provided documents that detail questionable expenses and missed obligations. We also have evidence of continued deception in business reporting. Some of the board members shifted uncomfortably, recalling the odd discrepancies in the financial statements that had been brushed aside when Nick offered vague explanations. Marjorie Bennett looked down at her clasped hands, recalling the times Nick had asked her to mask personal expenses as research and development. She felt the knot of guilt tighten in her chest. Nick finally seized the chance to speak. This is absurd. Every company has corporate retreats and client entertainment budgets. Yes, I might have used them in ways that appear questionable, but I assure you it was for the benefit of forging important relationships. The personal aspect of my trip is my private matter, and it does not concern the board. Sebastian Wu frowned. Nick, the personal aspect becomes relevant if you used company funds or time allocated for official duties. This is about the fiduciary responsibility you hold as CEO. If these allegations prove accurate, they point to a serious breach. Nick stammered, I have never once shirked my responsibilities to this company. My vision and leadership brought Adley Innovations to where it is today. This entire meeting is a smear campaign orchestrated by my wife, who is understandably emotional. Vivian's eyes flickered with anger. Emotional. Yes, I'm angry. Betrayed. But also pragmatic. I won't let your personal choices cripple our child's future, or the futures of all the employees who count on Adley Innovations for their livelihoods. A hushed murmur rippled across the room. In that moment, Vivian's composure and clarity outshone Nick's defensive bluster. The board members exchanged looks, each weighing the facts. Eventually, Harrison Kim cleared his throat. Nick, I've known you for years. You're a brilliant man, but I can't pretend I haven't noticed issues these past few months. The missed proposals, the late product rollouts, these are not normal. We need some accountability here." Sebastian Wu nodded solemnly and turned to the board. Motion to temporarily suspend Nicholas Adley as CEO, pending further investigation, and to appoint an interim CEO chosen by this board. A hush fell, followed by a flurry of exchanged glances. Slowly, hands rose in favor of the motion. Nick watched horror etched on his face as one by one board members, including former supporters, voted for his suspension. In a matter of minutes, Nick's iron grip on the company loosened, replaced by the unstoppable momentum of corporate due process. Sebastian nodded, eyes heavy with regret. The motion passes. Nicholas Adley is hereby suspended pending investigation. We will reconvene to determine the leadership structure. Meeting adjourned. Nick rose from his seat, fury contorting his features. He aimed a blistering glare at Vivian. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "You think you can run this company without me? It'll fall apart before your eyes." Vivian kept her gaze steady, even as her heart pounded. "I suppose we'll see," she replied softly, resolute in the knowledge that there was no turning back. The aftermath of the board's decision was immediate and seismic. Word spread through the hallways of Adley Innovations like a brush fire. Nicholas Adley, the company's larger-than-life founder, had been suspended. Employees whispered in corners, exchanging rumors and half-truths. Some couldn't believe that the man who had once inspired them with tales of visionary growth and innovative breakthroughs was suddenly on the brink of corporate exile. Vivian found herself the reluctant center of attention. In the days following the suspension, Sebastian Wu temporarily took on executive duties, but there was an unmistakable momentum behind making Vivian interim CEO. She had an undeniable advantage: her background in corporate law, her intimate knowledge of the company's history, and a sincerity that resonated in every conversation. Despite Nick's accusations that she was emotionally driven, Vivian demonstrated a calm and calculated approach. Still, the transition was not smooth. On her first day, stepping into Nick's old office, a sprawling corner space lined with awards plaques and a panoramic view of the city, she felt a pang of nostalgia. She remembered the early days when she and Nick would stay up late, brainstorming strategies for acquiring venture capital or wooing key clients. It all felt like a lifetime ago. Now she was here under circumstances she'd never imagined, protecting the very institution they had built together from Nick's own recklessness. Harrison Kim offered a courteous handshake, his expression sympathetic. "This isn't how I envisioned our leadership structure evolving," he admitted. "But I want you to know you have my full support." Marjorie Bennett was more reserved. Guilt still gnawed at her for having abetted some of Nick's questionable expenditures. Yet she approached Vivian's desk with a portfolio of financial data. "I know the ropes, and I know where the skeletons are buried," she said softly. "Let me help you clean this up." Vivian nodded, grateful for the olive branch. "It's going to take all of us working together. I'm not here to punish or humiliate Nick's allies. I'm just here to stabilize the company." With that, the frenetic pace of corporate life took hold. Vivian dived into marathon meetings, investor calls, and briefing sessions on critical projects. One of Adley Innovations' most significant ventures, a joint AI research initiative with the government, had been stalled due to Nick's inattention. Vivian made it her priority to get it back on track, meeting with project managers and forging a new sense of collaboration. As Vivian rose to the occasion, Nick spiraled downward. Stripped of his CEO title, he was forced to vacate his office. In desperation, he attempted to curry favor with board members, insisting the allegations against him were overblown. But as more evidence surfaced, expense reports for 5-star resorts under client entertainment, suspicious cash withdrawals, and personal flights booked with the corporate jet, his pleas fell on increasingly deaf ears. Lauren Reyes also felt the tremors of Nick's downfall. With rumors swirling, she found herself ostracized by colleagues who had once admired her technical prowess. She received a stern memo from Human Resources reminding her of the company's policy against unethical conduct. Though she was not officially fired, her position grew tenuous, and she spent more time avoiding watchful gazes than doing meaningful work. Meanwhile, Vivian pressed on, spurred by a mix of ambition and necessity. The guilt and sorrow she felt over her marriage's collapse did not vanish, but she compartmentalized it to fulfill her new role. Late at night, when the lights were off and she was alone in the CEO's office, she sometimes found herself pressing a hand against her pregnant belly, whispering, "Stay strong for me, baby. We're almost there." Under Vivian's guidance, the climate at Adley Innovations started to shift. There was a renewed sense of discipline, a clearer allocation of budgets, and a more transparent reporting structure. Investors, initially spooked by Nick's suspension, began to warm to Vivian's leadership after a successful quarter-end review showed stable, if not improved, financials. Yet not everyone was content. A faction within the company and among the shareholders felt loyal to Nick and questioned Vivian's ability to lead long-term. They called for a thorough external audit, wanting to ensure no biases existed in the evidence that led to Nick's suspension. Vivian, confident in her position, welcomed the audit. "Let the truth come to light," she said. "That's the only way we can move forward." Truth, however, has a way of exposing more than one bargains for. While Vivian was busy charting the company's course, Nick was plotting a comeback, one that would push this drama into an even more precarious territory. Nick paced the living room of the penthouse he had rented after leaving the marital home. He had been forced to move out when tensions with Vivian hit a fever pitch. The swanky decor, the glass coffee table, the plush white rug, and the modern art on the walls brought him little comfort. Furious and humiliated, he downed glass after glass of whiskey, seething over the betrayal he felt from his wife and the board members who had once admired him. Lauren tried to comfort him, but her presence felt like a reminder of the scandal. "Maybe we should lay low," she suggested one evening, inching closer to him on the couch. "Give the company time to settle." Nick snorted. "Lay low. Why should I? This was my company, my vision, and Vivian thinks she can just waltz in and claim it over my dead body." Lauren shrank back, sensing the anger radiating off him. She knew that part of Nick blamed her for his downfall, even if he wouldn't say it outright. Their once rosy affair had transformed into a toxic dance of finger-pointing and desperation. That night, Nick dialed the number of a high-profile attorney named Zachary Klein. Known in certain circles for representing CEOs in messy corporate disputes, Klein was a bulldog who relished a good fight. After explaining his predicament, Nick listened silent and grim as Klein laid out a plan. "We need to discredit Vivian's evidence," Klein said. "Prove it was gathered illegally or that she manipulated it for personal gain. If we can show that she used her position and resources in an unethical manner, we can cast reasonable doubt on the board's decision." Nick's eyes gleamed. "So there's a path to reinstatement." "It's not guaranteed," Klein cautioned. "But I've seen weaker cases get Kers reinstated. It all depends on how much dirt we can dig up on Vivian." Over the next few weeks, Nick and Klein worked tirelessly to compile any information that could taint Vivian's reputation. They rummaged through her personal history, her academic records, even her charitable affiliations. Nick also tried to exploit Vivian's friendship with Daniel Townsend, alleging that he manipulated the board under the guise of legal counsel. He fabricated a storyline that Vivian and Daniel had conspired to steal the company out from under him in an orchestrated coup. Simultaneously, Nick began contacting select board members who had expressed lingering loyalty. He dangled the promise of new investment deals, claiming he had lined up powerful partners overseas who were interested in injecting capital into Adley Innovations if and only if Nick was restored to his rightful position as CEO. The lure of potential profits and the nostalgia for the dynamic leadership Nick once offered began to sway a handful of directors. While Nick orchestrated his counterattack, Vivian was oblivious to the full extent of his schemes. She was consumed by the daily demands of her new role, from stabilizing the product pipeline to reassuring nervous employees. One morning, she woke to find multiple articles popping up in business tabloids with sensational headlines. Adley Innovations in turmoil. Was the CEO ousted in a corporate coup and the pregnant wife's power grab? Inside the boardroom, drama. Vivian's phone buzzed incessantly. Marjorie called, her voice shaky. "These rumors, are they true? Are you and Daniel Townsend more than just old friends and a lawyer-client relationship?" Vivian's face burned with indignation. "Absolutely not. This is Nick's doing. He's trying to paint me as a manipulator." A sense of foreboding gripped her. She realized that Nick would not relinquish control without a fierce fight. She shared her concerns with Daniel, who advised her to remain transparent. "If he's attacking your credibility, we respond with authenticity. Keep a clear paper trail. Let the audit proceed. The facts are on our side, not his." But Daniel's confidence did little to soothe Vivian's nerves. She was now juggling the responsibilities of an interim CEO, a mother-to-be just weeks away from delivery, and a target of scurrilous rumors designed to undermine her leadership. Each day, as she walked the corridors of Adley Innovations, she saw uncertain faces, staff members who wondered if the company's turmoil would jeopardize their jobs. Nick's plan, meanwhile, was gathering momentum. He managed to meet discreetly with the audit committee, hinting that if they discovered certain irregularities in Vivian's tenure or in Daniel Townsend's legal approach, Nick would reward them handsomely once he was back in charge. The lines between corruption and legitimate business strategy blurred in Nick's desperation to reclaim his power. The stage was set for a final showdown that would not only determine the future of Adley Innovations, but also test the limits of Vivian's resolve, Nick's cunning, and just how far karma could stretch before snapping back with a vengeance. In the midst of the media frenzy and boardroom politics, Vivian found a surprising source of support in Marjorie Bennett, the CFO, who had once facilitated Nick's questionable financial requests. Stung by guilt and tired of the toxic atmosphere, Marjorie decided to come clean. She requested a private meeting with Vivian late one afternoon, slipping into the CEO's office with a file tucked under her arm. "I'm not proud of what I've done," Marjorie began, eyes downcast. "There were times Nick asked me to fudge expense reports or authorize extravagant spending in the name of client relations. I never felt comfortable with it, but I didn't question him. He was the CEO, and I wanted to keep my job." Vivian inhaled slowly, steadying herself. "I appreciate your honesty. It must not have been easy." Marjorie opened the file, revealing a trove of documents. "These are backups, transfers, receipts, and emails that prove Nick knew exactly what he was doing. He can't claim ignorance or blame others. If an independent audit sees this, It will confirm how he systematically misused company resources for his personal agenda. Vivian eyed the incriminating evidence. This is exactly what we need to counter Nick's smear campaign. He's already trying to discredit me, but these documents show a pattern of misconduct on his part. Marjorie's eyes brimmed with tears. I only hope this can help Adley Innovations survive this chaos. I love this company. I've been here from the early days. I don't want to see it crumble under Nick's reckless ambition. Moved. Vivian reassured her. I'm grateful you've come forward, Marjorie. This goes a long way in setting things right. Let's keep these documents safe. The auditors will be here next week, and we'll show them everything. Word of Marjorie's confession soon reached Nick, who erupted in fury upon learning of her betrayal. That ungrateful CFO, he raged to Lauren, his hands clenching into fists. I gave her a position of power, and this is how she repays me. Lauren tried to calm him. We can't control what she does. Maybe we can discredit her. Say she's only trying to save her own skin. Nick shook his head, exasperated. I don't know if that will be enough. Vivian and Marjorie together hold all the cards now. I might need to leave the country for a while until this blows over. Lauren's face fell. Leave the country? Are you serious? Just until I figure out a better strategy, Nick snapped. I won't go down without a fight. But if the audit committee sides with Vivian, I might face serious legal consequences. Lauren realized that Nick's desperation had grown too toxic, and she worried about her own career and reputation, which were already in tatters. Her eyes darted to the door as if seeking an escape from the suffocating tension. Meanwhile, as Vivian readied for the audit, she received an unexpected phone call from Harrison Kim. Listen, Harrison said, I've been quietly gathering support among some major shareholders. They see how hard you've been working, and they appreciate the stability you're bringing. Once the audit confirms your findings, they're prepared to vote you in as permanent CEO. Vivian's breath caught. Permanent CEO, she echoed, her hand instinctively resting on her swollen belly. The thought of leading Adley Innovations on a permanent basis had never been her ambition, but fate had thrust this path upon her. I'm honored, Harrison. Let's make sure we do this by the book. I don't want any more backroom deals or manipulations. This company deserves better. In the days leading up to the auditor's arrival, Vivian spent countless hours reviewing documentation, preparing statements, and meeting with department heads. She wanted to ensure every corner of Adley Innovations was ready for scrutiny. Daniel Townsend coordinated with outside counsel, ensuring a fair and transparent process. Finally, the audit team. A well-respected firm, led by a stern yet fair-minded woman named Patricia Cook, arrived. Over the course of several days, they pored over emails, financial statements, and testimonies from key employees. Tension reigned in every corridor, but Vivian maintained her composure, guiding the auditors openly and answering their questions honestly. Nick tried to intercept the auditors, demanding that they review damning evidence against Vivian. Yet his evidence proved shaky, mostly hearsay, and personal emails taken out of context. When pressed for more concrete proof, Nick resorted to emotional tirades, further alienating himself from those he sought to persuade. As the audit neared its conclusion, a quiet hush settled over Adley Innovations. Employees felt the collective weight of the potential outcome. One verdict could either cement Vivian's leadership and exonerate her from Nick's accusations, or cast doubt on her legitimacy and open the door for Nick's return. Karma, it seemed, was finally poised to deliver its blow. Everything hung in the balance, awaiting Patricia Cook's final report. And in the background, Vivian braced herself. not just for the future of the company, but for the imminent birth of her child, adding yet another layer of poignancy to this already gripping real-life drama. Patricia Cook concluded the company-wide audit with a meticulous presentation in the same glass-walled boardroom that had witnessed Nick's suspension. The atmosphere was electric. Board members, department heads, and major shareholders gathered their expressions a collective study in anticipation. Patricia began by praising Adley Innovations for its generally robust financial structure and innovative product lines. A note of optimism infused the air. But then she cleared her throat, flipping to the next page of her report. However, she continued, our investigation also uncovered significant misuse of company funds, circumvention of expense protocols, and evidence of an inappropriate personal relationship that interfered with corporate decision-making at the highest level. All eyes fell on Nick, who sat stiffly in the back row, face pale. Patricia ticked through the specifics: inflated travel expenses for exotic resorts, suspicious consulting fees disbursed to accounts linked to Lauren Reyes, and personal charges disguised under vague categories like market research. The final dagger came when Patricia revealed internal communications showing Nick had pressured Marjorie Bennett to misreport certain financials to keep the board in the dark. As a result, Patricia concluded, we find that Nicholas Adley, in his capacity as CEO, compromised the company's integrity. These are serious breaches. Our recommendation is that Mr. Adley's suspension be made permanent, and he be barred from resuming any executive role within Adley Innovations. A tense murmur rippled through the room. Some of Nick's old allies clenched their fists. Others exhaled in relief. Harrison Kim stood to formally propose a board resolution to finalize the removal of Nicholas Adley from the CEO position and appoint Vivian Adley as permanent CEO. The resolution passed by an overwhelming majority. Nick slumped in his seat, fury and disbelief battling in his eyes. Yet karma was not done. Moments after the resolution, 2 officials from the city's finance regulatory body stepped into the boardroom. Patricia had forwarded her audit findings to the regulatory authorities, citing potential violations of corporate governance and financial fraud statutes. The officials presented Nick with a notice to appear for an official inquiry, a step that could lead to civil penalties or even criminal charges. Nick's face drained of color. He tried to speak, but his words faltered. The room stood silent, except for the clicking of the officials' pens against their clipboards. Vivienne, who had watched the proceedings with calm determination, felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Part of her sympathized with the man she had once loved, who now looked like a trapped animal. But a sharper, cooler part of her recognized that justice was being served. Nick had made choices that threatened not just their marriage, but the livelihoods of hundreds of employees. This was the cost of his hubris. With adrenaline still coursing through her veins, Vivian rose and walked over to Nick. She offered a civil nod, ignoring the outraged glare he threw her way. "I'm sorry it had to come to this," she murmured. "But you left me no choice." Nick spat out a bitter laugh. "You think you've won? Just wait. This isn't over," he snarled. But the empty bravado in his voice betrayed a broken man. Security personnel stepped forward politely, urging Nick to leave. Lauren Reyes, who had been hovering near the doorway, quickly gathered her things and followed him out, her face etched with regret. In the hallway, Nick burst into a tirade against Lauren. "You brought me nothing but trouble," he hissed, ignoring her attempts to console him. The weight of his misdeeds and the looming inquiry pressed down on him like a suffocating blanket. Meanwhile, within the boardroom, Vivian was met with a round of subdued, yet heartfelt applause. She had emerged victorious in a battle she never asked for, but was forced to fight. Over the next week, news outlets ran headline after headline detailing Nick's downfall, the Mistress scandal, and the triumphant rise of the pregnant wife who wrested control of the empire. Ironically, the same media that had once championed Nick as a self-made genius now labeled him a cautionary tale of unchecked ego and betrayal. Hard karma had indeed struck, and Nick felt its full impact. His accounts were frozen pending investigation. Potential investors distanced themselves from him like a contagious virus. Even his loyal aides scattered to protect their own reputations. In the span of a few months, Nick went from being the envy of the corporate world to a pariah staring down legal battles and potential financial ruin. Vivian, however, pressed forward, determined to salvage the future of Adley Innovations and the child she was soon to bring into the world. The board's trust in her leadership soared as she navigated the storm with grace and resolve. While she carried the weight of heartbreak, betrayal, and late-term pregnancy, she also carried the hope that maybe, just maybe, she could build something lasting and honorable on the ruins Nick had left behind. In the months that followed, Adley Innovations began a renaissance under Vivian's measured leadership. She restructured the management hierarchy, promoting rising talents who had been stifled under Nick's domineering style. Harrison Kim's operational expertise shone in new cross-department collaborations, and Marjorie Bennett worked tirelessly to rebuild the company's financial integrity. Together, they forged a culture of transparency and ethical conduct, a stark contrast to the secretive climate that had once ruled. Meanwhile, Nick faced a prolonged legal ordeal. Zachary Klein, his high-powered attorney, did everything within his capability to keep Nick out of jail, negotiating settlements and appearing in multiple hearings. But the evidence was overwhelming, and Nick's credibility was in tatters. He managed to avoid prison time thanks to a plea deal, but at a hefty cost, staggering financial penalties that depleted much of his remaining wealth, and a lifelong ban from holding any officer or director position in a publicly traded company. With Nick out of the picture, Lauren Reyes attempted to reinvent herself. She left Adley Innovations, resigning quietly before the board could terminate her. Rumors suggested she moved abroad, hoping to escape the scandal and start anew. No one at Adley Innovations had heard from her since, and few expressed interest in tracking her down. Her name became a footnote in the company's complicated history. For Vivian, the journey was far from over. Just a few days after Nick's legal battles concluded, she went into labor. A hush of anticipation gripped the staff at Adley Innovations when they heard the news that their newly appointed CEO was rushed to the hospital. Messages of support and excitement lit up the internal communication channels. The birth was not without complications compounded by the stress that had shadowed her entire pregnancy. Yet after several tense hours, Vivian delivered a healthy baby boy. Holding her son for the first time, she felt a swirl of gratitude and relief. The child represented a turning point, a promise that life could be regenerated, even when so much had been torn apart. Elizabeth Townsend. Her mother and Daniel Townsend stood by her side in the hospital, sharing in her tears of joy. Over the next few weeks, Vivian embraced the delicate balancing act of motherhood and corporate leadership. Though she cherished every moment with her newborn, she also felt responsible for the hundreds of employees counting on her to keep Adley Innovations stable. Fortunately, with Harrison and Marjorie acting as her hands-on deputies, she could step back just enough to spend precious time with her child. In the months that followed, Adley Innovations made headlines once more, but this time for positive reasons. The company's AI research venture secured major government funding, and the new strategic alliances Vivian fostered began to bear fruit. Share prices rebounded. Magazines that once gossiped about scandal now ran profiles praising Vivian's resilience and vision. Some even dubbed her the phoenix of the tech world, rising from the ashes of Nick's downfall. As for Nick, he receded from the public eye. He settled in a quieter part of the country, rumored to be spending his days writing a memoir or dabbling in small-scale consulting gigs that didn't violate his ban. Whatever bravado he once had was stripped away. Whenever the media caught a glimpse of him, he looked subdued, haunted by regrets. And so the final chapter of this real-life drama closed not in cataclysm, but in renewal. The millionaire who had flaunted his mistress on glitzy vacations lost everything to his own hubris. His pregnant wife, underestimated and betrayed, stepped in to lead and protect their shared legacy. Though the scars remained memories of betrayal, heartbreak, and moral compromise, the seeds of a brighter future had been planted. Vivian often reflected on the improbable journey that had taken her from a supportive spouse in the background to a commanding figure at the head of a tech empire. While her marriage was in ruins, a new life had emerged both in the form of her child and a revitalized company ethos. In that sense, her story was not merely one of retribution, but of transcendence, a testament to the power of inner strength when faced with the darkest storms. The dramatic saga of Nick Adley's downfall and Vivian Adley's rise as the new leader of Adley Innovations proves that life's most punishing lessons often pave the way for remarkable transformations. As lies unraveled and hidden motives erupted into the public eye, it took grit, determination, and a fierce devotion to truth for Vivian to protect her unborn child and the company she helped build. The twists and betrayals capped by the ultimate stroke of karma remind us that power can vanish in an instant when misused, while resilience in the face of adversity can propel us to even greater heights. If you found this story riveting, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you'll stay tuned for more real-life dramas, inspiring tales, and shocking twists. Together, let's keep the conversation going.